Pella's approach isn't just looking at the most recent numbers and the most recent valuation. We also spend a lot of time thinking about the strategic positioning of companies. And I'll give you two examples which contrast with each other. Uber is one of our core holdings at the moment, and that company has undergone a huge transition over the years, which gives us confidence in its strategic positioning and its competitive advantages. So at the heart of Google, at the heart of Uber, it provides one service really. It's about matching drivers with people needing things delivered. So that manifests in two main divisions. There's the rides division, and there's the delivery division, which most people see as Uber Eats. Now, the important thing about that is we could always see the competitive advantages about that in that business, which I'll speak to in a second. But what really changed is we're now seeing those advantages manifest in actual financial returns. So the company now, in last financial year, delivered $3 billion of free cash flow. So we know it's a real business. But going to the strategic positioning, what's most relevant to understand about Uber is that it operates something called local network effects. So it's not a global network effect, it's a local one in each individual city market. And in local network effects, what you really need to do is you need a large number of drivers and you need a large number of users. You can't just have one. And you can't just have a large number globally, you need to have a large number in a small area to satisfy all the users in that area. And that becomes a very big competitive advantages. It's very hard for other companies to match that scale. So if someone else wants to build a business that can actually match someone who needs some delivery service, they need to go into each individual market and have hand-to-hand combat with Google in each of those individual markets. But because Uber is so global, it can afford to lose money in one market whilst it's making another market. So if I'm going to compete with him, that's pretty tough because Uber can say, right, well, we'll make that market loss-making for the time being. It's okay, we're making money everywhere else. And then for me to compete in that market, I've got to get lots of drivers and lots of people using it. Now, as a consumer, why are you going to use two driver apps? You're only going to use the one app. It's just, what's the point? Or you might have two. But so for another person to come in, there's the consumers already comfortable with what they use, and they've got a track record. They know how it works. So the only way you can get them is by discounting them. But then Uber's got the capacity to discount to match you. So it's just a very strong competitive advantages. It's one of the best I've ever seen. It's very difficult to displace Uber. And as it grows, that flywheel just embeds its competitive advantages deeper and deeper and just makes it very difficult to displace. Now, there are risks which we're mindful of. There's always regulation. That's always an issue. The bigger risk at the moment is to do with autonomous vehicles. And the thinking there is if I've got autonomous vehicles, I no longer have that network effect. I could just bring a whole lot of cars in and I'm no longer matching the drivers and the consumers, which is the difficult thing about the network effect. I'm just offering a service of the cars. We are more sanguine about that because these autonomous vehicles, we believe there'll be lots of players. And then those players, when there's lots of players, they need to aggregate through someone. And so we think that's going to be Uber. And we also think Uber's in a very good position to bring a whole lot of volume to those autonomous vehicles. So they really will want to do a deal with them, specifically because that's the only way they're going to get passengers in order to make it viable. So Uber, every day that we use it and it grows, it's getting stronger and stronger, and we don't believe it's got material competitive threats, and it's now free cash flow generative and is on a good valuation given its high teens revenue growth. Now moving to Alphabet. Alphabet is a position we've held for many years, and we held it prior to even setting up Pella. We held it for many years. It's a company that we've always admired, and we believe that the Google search business model is fantastic. But the fact of the matter is something's changed. And the thing that's changed is AI. And the way AI's changed it is these AI searches in many cases are better than Google search. Not always, but in many use cases they're better. And so that means there are many instances where you're going to use this AI search rather than Google. So Google's going to go from 90% market share of search, which it currently is, probably even more than that, to something lower than that. At the same time, you've got this issue that the search market's actually slowing. So search advertising for many years grew double digits, and last year it probably grew in about 10%. And in fact, in April, it had its first ever decline in number of searches, first in its history. So Google's got this issue where its underlying market is slowing, and it's got this growing competition from AI search, and so that's going to impact its revenue growth. At the same time, there's a whole lot of regulatory issues to consider. So the US DOJ is trying to force Google to no longer pay Apple to be the default search engine on the iOS devices. And that matters a lot because Google generates approximately 50% of its US searches on an iOS device. So now when you open your iPhone, and you do a search, it might not be the Google search anymore. You can choose something else. You can default it to ChatGPT or something else. And again, that's just another headwind. And when you think about all these revenue headwinds, you're going from a company that is just used to growing easily and without effort to suddenly, this isn't so easy. And part of the issue is the innovator's dilemma, which is that whole thesis championed by Clayton Christensen. And what it basically says is incumbents sometimes suffer, not because they're badly managed, they suffer when there's a new entrant simply because it's hard for them to move into that new space. The new thing will cannibalize them because their existing business is so profitable and it's hard for them to move to something else. So for Google which is moving to AI and was a leader in AI, to suddenly say, well, we're going to offer all AI search, all of a sudden that means fewer of those little blue links that you're going to press. So that's going to cannibalize their revenue. So of course they're reluctant to do it, and of course it's hard for them to do it. But even when they do it, it's going to be hard. If they don't do it, they're going to lose a lot of business to OpenAI, and if they do it, they're likely going to lose advertising revenue, and they have to shift to a subscription revenue model. At the same time, moving to AI compute is far more expensive than traditional compute. And so what that means is not only will Google's revenue slow, but its margins are likely to compress due to the higher costs. So we just see a litany of issues facing Google. The market is coming around to that, and Google now looks very cheap on the face of it. But again, that brings us back to the Pella's approach, that we don't just look at the numbers and we look at the strategic positioning. And we think that there's lots more bad news to come out for Google, and it's right that its valuation multiples dropped a lot. Doesn't mean we won't ever invest in it. If it drops low enough, we will enter it. But I think the key message I'm trying to deliver today is we've given an example of Uber, which we own because its strategic positioning gets stronger every day. And then we're no longer in Alphabet because the strategic positioning is getting weaker every day. And I think that's the key message I'd love to leave with you, is that Pella, we look at the financials, we look at the valuation has to make sense, but that's not enough. The strategic positioning also has to make sense to us.